presenter is a gentleman named Joshua Smith, who I'm proud to call a friend and have been for a long time. He is a cyber analyst here at Dynetics. He's going to speak today about the dark side of PowerShell. If you guys aren't familiar with PowerShell, he's going to give us a very good intro to it and show us how to use and abuse it.
Awesome. Thanks, Russ. Thank you. Yep. Everybody hear me okay? Good to go? Great. All right. Welcome to the dark side of PowerShell. My name is Joshua Smith. There really isn't 409 slides in case anybody's worried. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Joshua Smith. I do work here at Dynetics. At Dynetics, I get the opportunity to do a couple things. We work on both the offensive and the defensive side. That's fun and applicable. Everything on the offensive side, from phone scans to pen tests to red teaming, but really being able to take that stuff that we learn on the offensive side and use it on the defense. That's actually some of my favorite things to be able to have the opportunity to do, because we get a client that says, hey, we just got owned. How'd they own us? We can go in there and fix it. And because we kind of have that offensive mindset, it helps out a lot because we know what we're going to do to prevent it from happening again. All right. I have some certs. Those are nice. And moving on. So today we're going to go through, I'm going to go over real quick what our goals are for today. We're going to go through mostly and spend most of our time on offensive PowerShell. We're going to spend a little bit of time on defensive PowerShell. And then lastly, we're going to get into just kind of wrapping things up, okay? So goals, what are we trying to do, all right? So you can read. Really, we're going to be doing demos, okay? There's not going to actually be that many slides. We're going to walk through, and I'm going to show you practical examples of how we've seen attackers using PowerShell, okay? Then we're going to go through, and we're going to cover how to actually defend and detect. And then let me be real clear on what this presentation is and is not, okay? I don't grok PowerShell. I don't know everything there is to know about it, right? I Google it just like everybody else. What we have seen is exact instances of it being used and abused. So to steal Moxie Marlin Spike kind of things, if you're looking to be dazzled with brilliance, that presentation was by the high schoolers earlier today. That's not this. The point of this presentation, and what I want you to walk away with, is understanding how PowerShell is being abused, right? That's the point of this. I was trying to figure out a best way to kind of demo what that looked like in my own mind of seeing PowerShell and that process of like kind of an interesting scripting language to like, wow, this thing can do lots of stuff. The best way I could define or show you my progression in PowerShell is with this little guy, okay? Because when I first saw it, I'm thinking, look at that. Exchange management, awesome. AD management, wonderful. And then they showed me the bad stuff, and I'm like, whoa, hey, easy. Okay, so if you're a grizzled PowerShell guy, you might not see anything here crazy new. Okay, if you are new to PowerShell and aren't familiar with it, hopefully you'll see a few things that will catch your attention. And you're probably not going to be as cute as the guy, but that's okay. Hopefully you'll learn. All right, so real quick, PowerShell was released back in 2006. The really interesting thing to know is right now, they're about to release version 5, but version 2 is what's installed on Windows 7 and 2008 R2. So you'll see all or mostly any attack tool, if at all possible, we tailored to those situations, to version 2. You get a little bit limited functionality, but the important point is it'll work across the board, okay? It's built on .NET, and it's a scripting language. The real short story on PowerShell is it can do absolutely anything. It's ridiculous, okay? It's so good, and in such a bad way sometimes. And it's sometimes affectionately referred to as Microsoft's built-in post-exploitation tool. Because back in the day, you owned a box, and you had to get some tools up there and this and that, all gone. You get a hold of PowerShell, you're ready to roll, okay? And we'll see that being used. So one important point, and I'll talk about this while we're going through the demos, okay? You're on your own for initial remote code execution. We're going to move through the network and get code execution on other boxes, but that first pivot point, that first kind of whole beachhead that you're going to get is usually going to be through another means. It's not going to be through PowerShell. I'm not saying you couldn't do it, it just probably wouldn't be pretty. All right? So that's one point, and I'll talk through that in a minute. And then the last thing we're going to talk about before we jump into demos is why is PowerShell a big deal? And the demos will talk to this a good bit, okay? The first thing is whitelisting. We're seeing more and more companies, not lots by any stretch, but more that are willing to do whitelisting. Typically, PowerShell's on the whitelist. It's a Microsoft executable. It's digitally signed, and most of the time, you're good to go. All right. The other thing, and these two are kind of with AV, we're going to talk about why that's good because we can bypass it, all right, and I'll show you how we do that. And then lastly, especially when you're talking forensics, if you leave things behind, that's not so great. So we can do things that don't leave anything behind on the disk, okay? So that's why PowerShell rocks. Let's just jump in and watch how that happens, okay? So offensive PowerShell, we're going to kind of meld these together a little bit. We're going to look at how we've seen malware using PowerShell. We're going to show how we've seen pen testing using PowerShell, or how we use PowerShell pen testing, I should say. And then we're going to look at some APT examples. And I'm sorry to throw that term in there, but that's what everybody calls it. All right, so offensive PowerShell. All right, so again, we're going to be walking through some demos, right? So the first thing to note, this is a box that's out in the cloud. It's just a VPS that I rent, and it just catches all my shells, okay? So it's just a copy of Meterpreter that's going to catch any shells that I send to it. That's going to be our box we're going to be using as our C2 and going to be interacting with. So that I'm going to be moving screens and going between this and the victim box a lot of times, okay? So when I slide around, I'll try to kind of explain what's going on, but just beware I'm going to be sliding a little bit. All right, so our first example, we're going to talk about, this is some malware called PowerLex. About 6 or 7 months old now. All right, so here's our victim machine. And I'm just going to kind of talk through this as it goes. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is I want to show you that we're going to run a command, and that command, and I'll zoom in on this in just a second here, is in this case, it's going to pop a calculator. Not that big of a deal, right? The interesting thing about this, and the interesting thing to a malware author in this case as well, is if you look, there's calculator. I actually ran this command by running run-dll32, called some JavaScript that's calling some VB script, okay? So chaining some things there. And I popped in calc.exe. All right, so in that case, I can execute code, any code. In this case, it's just calc. So what malware authors figured out was, hey, that's an effective way to bypass AV. So in this case, now, and I'm going to disable AV. I'm going to kind of go against what I'm saying because this started to be detected a couple months before I did this. So I'm going to disable AV in this case, but I promise we'll put it on and we'll get past AV in just a couple minutes. So we're going to go and disable AV. And what we're going to do is we're going to load some registry entries, all right? And so I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to open up regedit. And you'll see that's my current user's run keys. So that's what's run whenever I log on, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to run a regedit, a reg file, and we're going to make a couple entries, okay? So you'll see up here, we've got some run DLL32 calling JavaScript, and there's command. So if you remember back to the example that I gave, and we're going to go ahead and log off and then log back on. If you remember back to the example I gave, or kind of said at the beginning about initial code execution, is somehow you had to get that in there. So typically that's done by, hey, you need to install this Flash player before you can view this video. You run the executable, and I make those entries into the registry. That's how that usual hook is handled. Now, what happens after that hook, and those two registry entries are put in there, is user logs out, and then sometime later logs back in. All right, so let's let this have a second to boot, and I'll show you what's going on in the background. And if you remember, I ran that run DLL32 command that's calling, in this case, a PowerShell command. So we'll let that load. All right, and now we'll view our task list, okay? So what you will see when I get this sorted is run DLL32 calling PowerShell, just what we put in there, right? So what's that doing? So I'm sliding over here. This is my handler box, and you'll see I have a Meterpreter shell. So what all that means is I've given myself, as the attacker, a shell on that machine, and I have whatever rights that user has. To prove that, I'm going to go ahead and log on. I'm going to get a shell going through Meterpreter, and I'm just going to dump a text file on the desktop. Okay. So we'll go through and CD to that user's desktop, and then output a text file. And we'll wait. All right, so we're on the desktop. We're going to echo out BSides into the BSides text file, and then we should be able to slide over and should see that text file is in place. There we go. So we've got control of that user's machine. All right, and that's the malware called PowerLex. All right, so that's one example. Now, The next example I'm going to go over is we're going to talk about something called Meterpreter that we were just using through some Metasploit, and we're going to talk about memory and why PowerShell is a big deal, because we can get into memory. All right. So here's our shell that we're going to be catching everything with from Meterpreter. All right. So we're going to go back over to our victim machine, and this time instead of running some malware, I'm just going to run a straight PowerShell command just to demo what's going on here. Okay. So you'll see it's pretty long. That's just an encoded command, PowerShell.exe, and then that's all base64 encoded. There's no magic going on there. And what will happen in a second here, okay, you'll see I've got a Meterpreter session going, okay? So my victim machine, in this case, I just ran the PowerShell command. It's going to send me back the shell to my Meterpreter handler here. And then we're going to give it a second. I'm going to go through this. You'll see that it's going to run a initial auto run script, which is going to migrate. So let me just go to, okay, so here's the important part. All right, so the current server process is PowerShell, and it's spawning notepad.exe, okay? So what's going on is that PowerShell command kicks off, right? Then I have a script in Meterpreter, in Metasploit, that says, hey, when you get going, I want you to inject yourself, a DLL, into a process called notepad.exe, okay? So the beauty of that is we're just going to move over in a process that's going to be pretty not noticeable. It's a copy of Notepad. Now, so there's our copy. We have Meterpreter working. We can interact with the system. That's great. So we'll interact, go through that. And just to prove I've got full control and just to explain a little bit more, so that DLL, that Meterpreter DLL, is now in the notepad.exe process, okay? So let me show you why that's important. So just to prove I have control, things are working like normal. And I'll show that AV is on here as well in just a second. Is we're going to echo out the test file to the desktop. And if that works, we should have our test file. So there we go, just showing you I got full control of that system. And so that's good. Now, here's the process list. You'll notice down here at the bottom, we just got notepad.exe. No more Meterpreter process, no more PowerShell process there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dump here, a memory dump. And I'm going to dump all the contents of that process, notepad.exe, out onto the desktop. And the significance of that, if you remember what I mentioned about Meterpreter, is now running in that process, okay? So I'm going to minimize that, and then start my hex editor. And I'll show you why this is a big deal and why this is kind of what makes PowerShell so good. All right, so there's our memory, and just to show there's no tomfoolery going on, you can see we got AV running. Okay, so Meterpreter's running fine, got things rolling, and it's fine because everything's sitting in memory. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this DLL that we dumped, or excuse me, this executable we dumped in a hex editor. And so I'm looking for a particular string called Meterpreter in a specific location. So I want to go down. So there's the Meterpreter string. So that's just inside that executable memory dump I dumped. And what I'm going to do is, because inside that executable, there's lots of DLLs that are loaded, PEs, right? So I'm going to do a search for something. I'm going to copy that memory file or that memory location real quick. So that's where Meterpreter sits. Open that up. All right, so we'll type that's where Meterpreter's sitting at that address. Okay, so that's point of reference. Now I'm going to do a search. When a PE loads, when a DLL or EXE loads, the beginning header is known. And in this case, I'm going to be do a search for uppercase DOS, and I'm going to go to the next place, and that's the beginning of that DLL. So that location is the address of where that Meterpreter DLL is sitting, okay? So I'm looking for the very beginning of it right now. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to type, that's the address, the beginning of the Meterpreter DLL. And now I'm going to go down, and I'm going to search for the next instance below that where that DOS string is. And that's going to tell me where the beginning of the next DLL is, okay? So I'm just really trying to capture that one DLL and kind of carve it out of there. That's the point. All right, so we're going to go down. We found it. So this is the location of the next DLL. So I'm going to copy that memory location, and we'll put that in here. Okay, so now we've got our beginning, we've got our end, we know where our Meterpreter DLL is. So I'm going to go through in this case, and I'm just going to just copy that entire location from start to finish, right? So copy that, and we're going to create a new file and paste that in there. And then we'll make sure that once it's in there, that it looks good. So we'll scroll up to the top, and you'll see there's the beginning of our header, our PD header. Okay? So we should just be able to save it. That should be our Meterpreter DLL. All right? Now, this is the point I want you to see. Okay? So we're going to hit save once I get it in here. Remember, I'm running fine in memory. Everything's good. And I hit save. Cannot open the file. Why can't we open the file? If we slide down here, detected threats. Okay? That's a big deal. All that happened, and the reason Meterpreter was working so well and PowerShell was doing its thing, is because I was all in memory. Right? As soon as I write to the disk, it says, hey, this is bad. Can't do this. But being in memory, it thinks everything's good. Okay? That's a big deal. Now that you know the technical reason of why PowerShell is a great thing and being in memory, it's hard to explain, right? And explaining that to my friends has been pretty fruitless. So really what I tell everybody when they say, what makes PowerShell so good, it's pretty easy. I just tell them, it's magic, baby. Just like this guy, right? So, I don't know. I had to work in the unicorn, and I can't grow that hair, so maybe it's jealousy. All right, so that's what makes PowerShell so good, is being able to do everything in memory, all right? So our next example I'm going to use is through a tool set here. All right, so the next little bit I'm going to show you is a PowerShell command. You'll see I run PowerShell here, and then I'm going to call something called invoke find local admin access, okay? And this is from a tool set in PowerShell called PowerUp. There's a lot of great tool sets, PowerSploit, PowerUp, PowerView, PowerCat. I mean, there's a PowerShell script for pretty much everything. Okay, what this one does is say I've compromised the box, right? I've gotten on this box, but I'm running as a local user, but only have user rights, right? So I can't get to a lot of the good stuff. Hey, I don't want to discount running as a user. You can find lots of amazing things, but at some point I usually want to escalate it up to be an admin. If the box I've landed on, like this one in this case, I'm running with local user rights, I might not have to privesc and try to figure out a way to get system on that one box. I might be able to just go to another box and get admin rights on there because he already has it. I don't have to hack anything, so to speak. All right. So you'll see I'm running this command to say invoke local admin access, and then you'll see where PowerUp is saying, hey, I'm going to look over the 13 servers that I can find. I'm going to use your credentials that you're running as right now, and I want you to tell me any instances that you're running as a local admin. So in this case, you'll see the current user, domain user 1, has local admin access on that workstation. So I've just saved myself a lot of grief, right? I don't have to go try whatever privesc that I have at my disposal. There's other ways of doing it. But in this case, I can just use the credentials I probably already have and migrate over to another machine. Save me some time and move on, all right? So that's a way we're seeing PowerShell being used, and it's hugely helpful, all right? All right, so this next example we're going to go through, again, we've got our handler here that's going to be catching our shells, and this is our victim machine. And this time we're actually going to create our file on this, or the file we're going to use is going to be created here as well. So you'll see I'm running a command, PowerShell, execution policy, bypass, generate macro. And I'm going to talk a little bit as I'm working through this. What we find, it's no really surprise to anybody that works in security, is that the weakest link is always the user. And one of the ways we exploit users is we send them documents that have macros in them, and they click enable, and we can own them pretty quickly. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to copy that IP address, and this script says, hey, enter your IP address, enter what port you want to send it to. That's that handler that I was showing you earlier. Then it asks you for the name of the document that you want to save. And so this script is actually going to take that information, create a file called financial data, and then I'm going to have it send me a Meterpreter shell with login persistence. And then it asks me, hey, once you do that, do you want it over HTTPS or HTTP? And that's an important point I was telling somebody earlier about bypassing IDS. We use this all the time with basic tool, HTTPS, and blow by hundreds of thousands of dollars of network equipment, okay? Encryption's tough to beat in that case. So that being said, I'm using this script, and what the output of this script is going to be a Excel document that has a macro, all right? So there's the document on the desktop being created. Again, it's just a simple PowerShell script. And we'll minimize that. Close it. Okay. So we'll open our file real quick just to show you, just to again show there's nothing crazy going on. We do have AV enabled, and you can see it's set to monitor memory as well, or excuse me, monitor real-time process as well with that real-time protection. And so now we'll open up this Excel document. So the thing about this Excel document that's different than a real engagement is I'm not going to name it financial data. I'm going to name it something like terminated employees, and I'm going to put something in here that instead of is nothing, I'm going to put something in here like click enable content to view, terminated employees. It gets a lot of users. So there's the enable content. I hit enable content, and that macro runs in the background. So what's that macro doing? That macro is doing two things. Okay, number one, it's sending me a shell. So I've got remote control of that guy's machine if all goes well at this point. The other thing it does is it actually also creates a registry entry that's going to load every single time that user logs in. So I've got persistence. Okay. So we're going to wait for that shell to come in. Okay, so there's our shell. So we've got our initial connection back. All right, and then we'll wait a second here. All right, so just to show you what's going on the back end as well, that's going to get us that persistence. We're going to open up a command shell, and I'm going to show you what happens. We're going to go to a directory where this file gets dropped. So that macro created a VBS file, VB script, and C users public. If you just directory it, just look at it, it's not there. But if you look at hidden attributes, there's config.vbs. Okay, so that macro created that config.vbs, the hidden file. And if you look at it, I'm going to go ahead and type that out so you can see the contents of it. It's pretty simple. It's just in here, you'll see, let's see in there. Yeah, just a PowerShell command. So there's the Windows style, there's PowerShell. All right. So that VB script is just running a PowerShell command. That's all. All right. And then just to show how that's getting persistence every time, is we'll open a registry editor, and you'll see there's a location called load at this location, current version Windows, and you'll see it calls C users public config.vbs. So every time that machine logs in and logs off with that user account, that gets run. Right? And the user can be, I don't have to be an admin at this point. I can be just a regular user. So there's my Meterpreter shells from the initial run. So what we're going to do is we're going to kill these just to show the logon persistence works. We'll kill those, and then we'll turn around and we'll hop back over to our Windows victim, and we'll log out and log back in. We're going to log off. All right. Okay, so we'll log back in. All right, so what should be happening there is that VB script should be being called, PowerShell should be invoked, I should be getting another shell. Okay, that's the point of this whole exercise. All right, so haven't had to do anything, and then I can hang tight and wait for that shell to come in. So there's the shell to come in, and this one is set to migrate as well, so this takes a minute to go through and migrate to Notepad. So there's the migrate. Again, I'm just migrating in notepad.exe so I can kill off the PowerShell command. And once I migrate, I should be able to run and view. And again, I have the rights that user has. So if that user's an admin, I'm an admin. If that user's not an admin, I'm probably going to try to figure out how I can become an admin pretty soon. Okay? So we'll go to the desktop, and then we'll output our file and make sure that works as well. So echo out, test 10. So echo that guy out, echo test 10 out to test10.txt. And we'll jump over to our machine, our victim, and you can see there's test 10. So we're good. All right. So we've got persistence. Handy things when you're in a pen test, I promise. All right. So that was another example we use on the pen test side. Now, this next example is something we've seen on the APT side. This is why APT actors like this stuff so much, and it kind of builds on a little bit what we talked about. So what I have here is, again, I'm not using Metasploit in this case. I've just got MeMeCat running, and it's just trying to catch shells on port 80. All right. So we're going to go, and we're going to hop over to our victim machine. And on our victim machine, we're going to run an executable. And it's called client2, client_02, right there. And just to show you, I am running AV. Good to go. Now, client_02 is just a C, it's a .NET assembly file. Okay, it's in C#. It's some code that I found, kind of modified to make it do what I want, and all it does is send me a command prompt, a command shell. All right. So I'm going to run it directly off the desktop, and there's nothing really fancy about this. So I'm going to run it just like I double-clicked it. You'll see nothing happens on this end, but if I go back and look at the processes, you'll see, and this is important, there's a client_02, and there's a command.exe right beneath it. Okay, that's an important piece, and I'll show you why in a minute. You'll see over on this end, on my attacker side, I've got a command shell. Not an elegant command shell, but it's one nonetheless, and it'll let me write to that user's desktop as well. Okay, so I'll echo out test2 to that file, and then we should be able to slide back over to our victim machine, and you should see that file is in place. Okay, so pretty benign, no big deal with that. Now, let me show you, let me kill off the processes. And again, just to clarify, look at that structure, that client_02 with command.exe right beneath it. All right, so let me kill those off, and we'll get rid of those. All right, so now, instead of just running that executable straight away, what we're going to do is we're going to open up PowerShell or a PowerShell script, okay? And you'll see in this PowerShell script, and we don't have to look at it all, but I am actually downloading and executing client_02 as well. All right, so no difference on my side as far as results and as the attacker. Okay, so I'm going to run this script, and it's going to call and download that file and then execute it. Now, so here's where I'm going to be running the command. We got PowerShell execution policy bypass, and now I'm going to call that PowerShell file. All right, so let me clear out the past session just so you can see this is fresh, and we'll listen. All right. Now, so this time I'm going to run this PowerShell script. All right, so we'll hit enter. And again, this one's not super streamlined. It throws some some verbose information, but you'll see the same results. Okay, so we've got a shell. All right, so I should be able to look at the directory and write anything to the desktop. So from the attacker's perspective, nothing's really different. All right, there's no real difference. But from an incident response point of view, this is drastically different. And let me show you why. Okay, so here's our test file proving that we can write to it. Now, look at the processes. And this is where it's big. You'll see PowerShell is called, there is no client_02.exe. And the reason that is because PowerShell downloaded the executable, put it into memory, ran it straight from memory, and did what it told it to do. The beautiful thing about that from an attacker's point of view is when this box gets rebooted, there are no artifacts. There's nothing that you're going to be able to go and download and get. On top of that, as an incident response guy, if I go in and try to triage this and I look at the running processes, where's the suspicious process? It's not there. All right. If I know better to look for PowerShell, it might be. But again, from an IR perspective, it can be a nightmare, really. All right. So that's why that's such a big deal. And you can see that CrowdStrike has a write-up on that as well, where you can see the script they're running and how they're doing it. But that's used in the real world today. All right. So our next and last demo on the offensive side is one called mass MeMeCats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a command shell. So we're on a victim machine in this case. And you'll see I'm going to try to echo something out to the system32 directory, which you'll see I've got access is denied. Right? I don't have rights to do that because I'm running as a user. All right. So MeMeCats, if you're not familiar with it, is a password dumping tool. All right, you run it, and it grabs passwords from memory and executes those. It tries to download that all the users' passwords in clear text. Really helpful. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to lead into MeMeCats here just a little bit, is I'm going to run this command. It's another PowerShell command called get GPP password. GPP is short for group policy preferences. And what group policy, one of the features of group policy preferences is it'll actually let me set the admin password on every single machine in the domain. Okay. And the nice thing about it, Microsoft did encrypt it with AES 256. The problem was they put the key that they used to encrypt it on their website. So it's the same for every organization. So you'll see I've got password 123 bang and super admin user. So I just asked AD nicely. I said, hey, can you give me the admin password for every one of your machines? And it gives it to me. Simple PowerShell script. You can do that, and there's other ways to do that. That's just a simple, elegant way of doing it. Okay. So the first step, what I'm trying to do in this engagement and trying to show off is I'm trying to get local admin username and password for every machine in the domain. All right. Next, I'm going to try to run a command shell, and I'm going to, instead of running it as myself, user one, I'm going to actually run it as that super admin user, because I'm presuming they have admin rights on every machine. And you'll see forum posts all over the place that say this is the way you set AD or admin passwords across the board. Not really great advice unless you're on the offensive side, kind of a nightmare on the defensive side. So we're going to run our command shell. This time we're running, and you'll see, we'll do who am I? I'll get that down there. Okay. You'll see I'm running a super admin user. Okay. So running a super admin user, I'm going to start up another PowerShell script, and this one's I'm going to prepare to run invoke mass MeMeCats. And so what mass MeMeCats is going to do, because I'm assuming I have admin rights probably now on a lot of machines on that network, is I'm going to say, hey, I want you to go to all these machines. I want you to run MeMeCats in memory. So you remember from the IR perspective, this is tricky. Okay. And while it's running, it's going to run those on all those machines, and I want you to give me back all your passwords that you can find. That's what MeMeCats does best. So we're going to run through real quick. I'm going to see these. I just ran a quit net view command, and here's some workstations that are in this test domain. All right, and so we'll save these names of these computers off into a text file. We'll call that hosts.txt. All right, so we've got that saved off. So we're good there. All right, so the next trick, we've got our admin password, we've got a list of machines we wanted to run it against. Now we're going to invoke mass MeMeCats. Okay, so let's go through and paste that in. And that's the wrong directory. All right, so we'll go to that user's desktop file where that host file is, and we should be able to run our command. So we're going to paste in our command to invoke mass MeMeCats, and we're going to tell it to make a firewall rule, and then we're going to say do it against all these hosts. So you'll see I hit enter. You'll see it's getting ready. It's sleeping. It's letting the web server stand up. And so again, what's going on is this command is running, PowerShell command. It's going to take those credentials, and you'll see that just popped up on the screen is another PowerShell command. That's me running MeMeCats against myself. And you'll see workstation 16, 17, 20, 21, and 26. We're executing MeMeCats against all of those guys. And now we really just kind of sit back and wait. Okay, so what's going on? It's uploading MeMeCats into memory. It's going to run MeMeCats in memory. It's going to download all that information and shove it back to me. Okay, so when that process terminates on that machine, it's a PowerShell process that's terminating. There is no MeMeCats being loaded, so you can kiss your AV goodbye. And I've got, hopefully, your password sitting on my machine. Okay, so we got to wait a second. Let's see. Get that going. So we'll let that run. All right, so there's our two of files we've gotten returned back for workstation 16 and 27. And then we'll grab this string to be able to parse out the comments, just because when you run MeMeCats, if you've ever seen output, it's pretty verbose. There's a boatload of stuff. So we'll kind of trim it down a little bit with some fine string magic. So we'll let that run. So you'll see now in this case, we have 3 text files coming back, 16, 26, and 27. And then just to show you coming back, we're going to go ahead and parse the output of all those text files and see what returns. Okay. So we'll hit more. And once it processes, you'll see there's our user, bsides.domain.admin, and password of super secret password you will never crack. We don't have to, right? We just pulled it straight out of memory. That's perfect. If we want another user off of one of the other machines, there's another user that's logged in called bsides.01 with a password of 123456. Clear text passwords. Makes my life easy. All right. So that is that's the offensive side. Okay. So let's leave the magic and come back over to defensive PowerShell. All right. I don't have a lot of time on the defense side, but it's important because this is more than half my job most of the time, and it's actually not that hard to block, all right? So the first thing I refer to, I mean, I pretty much preach these guys, Australian top 35 ways to mitigate cyber intrusions. Number one on the list, application whitelisting. The best way you can prevent PowerShell from owning everything in your network, whitelist everything. Then, after you have a whitelist, blacklist PowerShell. I have no reason, I've yet to encounter a reason for a legitimate user to be running PowerShell, all right? That's just, I'm sure it can happen. It doesn't usually happen though, okay? So you can't just blacklist PowerShell. There's ways around that. You got to whitelist first, blacklist PowerShell second, all right? The, thank you. Other thing, and this is my new baby right now. I can't say that, my new baby's 6 months old. This is my new favorite tool, I guess. Sysmon, all right, and Sysmon is it. Sysmon is a tool written by a guy named Mark Rusinovich and Thomas Garnier from Microsoft. It's free, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull a command prompt up, and I'm just going to run PowerShell exe with this encoded command. All right, you don't really have to know a ton about that. Just know that I'm running it. Right? Sysmon logs, and it logs everything, and it is a beautiful thing because what we're going to do is let's open up our logs. So I've installed Sysmon on this machine. I'm going down to applications, and you'll see a Sysmon folder. We'll open up that, and it's operation, I think, operational. And you'll see in operational, we're going to do a search for PowerShell. We'll do a find next, and so that's a PowerShell. That's an entry that has PowerShell in the name. What I want you to see is it's showing me the network connection for PowerShell. Right? It'll show me what command was run, PowerShell.exe. And it'll even tell me what machine it started from, source IP and destination IP. So there's the destination IP of my attacking machine, and there's the destination port. So I know what that process talked to. All right. Also, cooler than that, in my opinion, or very, very helpful, is we're going to scroll down and we're going to go to, instead of network connections, it logs file creations, service creation, lots of things, process creation. So you'll see I'm going to highlight process create. And down here, you can see the exact command I ran at the command line, okay? So I can see every single command line, PowerShell exe-encoded, and then your base 64. It logs every single command that's run. So how do we use this? How do I use this for my customers at least? We have all this data shipped up to a central server, a SIM, and anytime I see the word PowerShell, it alerts me. I have a heads up on it. So that's how you know it's going on. My favorite part about that, we were running this on a customer site, and they were actually getting pen tested. All right, so they end up and they tried their PowerShell command like a good pen tester would, and we see it. I mean, we pretty much called the client within 3 minutes and said, "Hey, something's going on, funny." And the thing is, because we knew about it, we could call them and say, "Hey, this is what's going on." But on top of that, because we were blocking it with whitelisting, blocking PowerShell, the pen tester had to kind of get on the phone to me and it's like, "Hey, I need you to allow my attack through." You know, you're kind of like, "Excuse me?" He said, "Well, I'm kind of stuck. You know, I need to be able to test these other things. They've said it's okay. So I'm asking you to let me do my attack." You know, so we kind of thought about it for a second. And then, of course, we did what any good guys were doing. Is like, "Can you say it again and louder and in writing?" So we were asking them to say, "Please." I don't know. We had some fun with that pen tester. So good times. But Sysmon is the bomb. You should run it on all your Windows machines. You should get all its log data and feed it up and analyze it. It is absolutely amazing. All right. So that's the detection side. So in summary, what I'm telling you is fear PowerShell. Okay. It's really, really good at what it does, both on the good and the bad. Okay. You need to at least control it and know what it's doing in your environment. We see this stuff going down on live networks. Okay. So it's not just a make-believe pie-in-the-sky kind of deal. There's some grizzled veterans in this room that use PowerShell, and they'll tell you how nice it is, okay? So you need to be aware of it. If you want to know a little bit more about PowerShell, again, I'm not a PowerShell master. I know how to use other people's stuff. Those guys are some PowerShell masters. They do some ridiculously smart stuff, okay? And if you want to see any of the references for any of the stuff I did, those are documented as well. So I think I'm pretty close to time. Appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate BSides for having me. Thanks to, I'd say thanks to Dynetics, my company I work for, but appreciate all the work that goes into this, and appreciate your guys' time too. Hope you learned something and enjoyed it. So thank you guys.